My name's Torre Chisholm. I'll just talk a little bit more about myself in a moment. But first, I want everybody to close your eyes. Yes, we're going to do dorky games together. Ready? Close those eyes. Yeah, Laura, especially you. Here's what I want you to imagine with your eyes closed. Imagine if someone came out of nowhere and gave you $1 million to use to saving animal lives in your community. All right? Imagine that. It's right there. It's right in front of you. How would you use those dollars? How would you know how you'd put those? So if you know how you'd use that $1 million to save more animals, raise your hand. Perfect. Now, everybody open your eyes. Leave your hand up. If your hand is up, leave your hand up, right? So everybody knows what they would do with the $1 million. Now, raise your hand if you know where that $1 million is going to come from. All right, we got a couple hands. Kudos to you. That's very important. But that's why we're having this session, right? Because that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how to use that. Like I said, my name is Torre Chisholm. I'm the executive director with the Friends of Pima Animal Care Center. I put up here, this is just a little bit of my fundraising experience. I will say first and foremost, I always say this, I am a fundraiser. I am not an animal welfare expert, which I will tell you a little bit, I have found to actually be a bit of a bonus for me. This is my first experience working in animal welfare. I've been with the organization for 4 years now, and I came on board initially as a development director, and now in the executive director role. I have fundraising experience in politics. I have it in universities. I was with Special Olympics, and now first time ever in animal welfare. And I will tell you, I put this up here partly so you know that I'm old, but also so just to show you that I've had a variety of different fundraising experiences, whether they were big organizations like universities, a little bit smaller organizations like Special Olympics, or circumstances where it felt like it was more extortion than it was fundraising. That would be the political one, obviously. And then now in the animal welfare, and I've been loving it. A little bit about Friends of PAC, in case you don't know. We are the Friends group for Pima Animal Care Center. That's in southern Arizona, based in Tucson. And I was fortunate to come on board with an organization that already had amazing life-saving programs in place. And through what we've done with our Friends group, we've just been able to do even more of that and do things that probably 4, 5, 6 years ago we never even envisioned being able to do. And that's what's so wonderful. And hopefully I have a chance to share some of that with you. So a few takeaways, because they did, when I had to submit what I would talk about, they wanted takeaways. You can see here takeaways. I hope that when you leave here, maybe some tools to evaluate the merits of volunteer run versus professional friends groups, strategies for how your friends group can achieve a no-kill status. So that's obviously the most important part of this topic. Strategies to keep your friends group focused on shelter missions. And I talked to a lot of people in different friends groups, and I think this is an area where sometimes there's challenges. And the strategies to make sure that your friends group is focusing on the most effective fundraising tools, right? All important. But to help me figure out what I should, broad topic, right? So a lot of things we could talk about. To help me figure out what I should focus on more, let's do the game where I get to ask everybody where you're from. So raise your hand if you're with a public shelter. All right, decent number, all right. How about with a private shelter? All right, well, so we're pretty even. Who currently has a friends group at your shelter? Okay. Who is in the process of considering whether or not you want to start a friends group, change? Okay, pretty even, wow, good mix. If you have a friends group, is it professionally run or is it volunteer run? Volunteer, okay, all right, well, we'll definitely be talking about that. And then last question, who here is in shelter management, like you would consider? All right, hands down, and who here is in fundraising? Okay, first of all, those who didn't raise your hand, you answered wrong. So just everybody go ahead and raise your hand right now, right? We are all in fundraising, yes? Now the other question is, who here is in animal life-saving? Everybody raise your hand. Just like we're all here for animal life-saving, we're all here also in fundraising. So great, all right, so pretty even mix, we'll have to spread it around. I'm gonna answer 3 main questions today. Question number 1, why have a friends group? Question number 2 is gonna be, where should our friends group invest their time? Because I switched the order on these, apologize. And question number 3 is, how do we keep our friends group focused? All right, let's get it going. Question number 1, why have a friends group? I will tell you this, no better way to create a dedicated grant source for yourself, right? This year, Friends of PAC, our organization, we're going to be giving $2 million to Pima Animal Care Center, right? So, I mean, wouldn't you just love to have an agency out there, a grantor, that you're the only person they can grant to, right? So basically, if you do a friends group, you're creating your own grant source. Second thing, specialization and focus. Just like everybody raised their hand, everybody said they're animal life-saving. I'm not an animal welfare expert. Well, what I can bring to the mix is my expertise in fundraising, right? And that's what a friends group can do for you. They can bring you that specialized skill set that maybe people that are working currently in the shelter, or maybe that your volunteers don't have, all right? You have that. Lets people know you take donations. This is surprisingly important. I didn't realize this until I went and worked. A lot of people are intimidated by, especially with public shelters. They don't necessarily know if they take donations, if they want, where those donations go. We have a lot of donors who they actually struggle the first time to make a donation, trying to figure out, who would I give this check to? Having a friends group lets everybody know that yes, we do take those donations. So really, really important. And then also want to hit on this, flexibility. Number 1 reason, frankly. Here's all the great things that we get to do, respond to emergencies. And I have my wonderful board chair, Laura, right here. She can tell you that one of the amazing things we did this last year is we had a couple shelter outbreaks. And as a preventative life-saving measure, we wanted to do medication for every dog in the shelter. Well, we have 550 dogs. That is not cheap. I guarantee a government agency could not manage that. All they had to do is call Laura and say, we need to do this. She says yes, the meds are there the next day. So it gives us a better chance to respond to emergencies, especially in a public entity, right? Second thing, work outside the procurement process. We fund positions at PAC a variety of ways. We do some grants directly to give, they give the money to the county, they hire them. But we also do a lot of leased employees, which means we hire them as Friends of PAC employees, and then we assign them to work at the shelter. It gives us the ability to, once again, respond to quicker situations, maybe circumvent some of the slowdown in governmental hiring processes. So we have that. Hire more efficiently, goes on that. Public procurement, I mean, everybody knows the challenges of going through a public procurement process. We get a chance to circumvent that, especially when it's ordering equipment and different things like that. So that's an advantage of a friends group. Build a protected reserve fund. I would say this actually might be the most important thing on this list, because everybody who works for a public agency, if you don't spend all your money, bye-bye, right? That's just the way it gets swept. Or, my favorite thing is you're trying to save. You have to understand, I worked 25 years in higher education in public universities, so I've experienced this way too often, right? You spend all this time, you got all the salary savings. I think I can use this to do this at the end of the year. Nope, they decide they're going to have to, they got to make some budget cuts, and they're going to sweep all of your salary savings, right? Well, the beautiful thing about what we could do as a friends group is we can actually create reserve accounts that are real reserve accounts. They're outside of the government, so they can't get swept. So that way, if there's ever a cut in some programs, we're able to step in and help make that really critically important. So important. Partner with private entities as our separate 501c3, which is how we're established with Friends of PAC. We actually get to partner more creatively with private entities than a government agency could. So important there. And offer more help for owned animals. And everybody's going to hear all sorts of great stuff this week about life-saving. A lot of that is focused on owned animals, isn't it? How do we keep them from even ending up in the shelter in the first place? And a lot of government agencies are very restrictive about what they can do or can be done for owned animals. We have the opportunity as an organization to work outside of that as Friends of PAC, and it's a major way that we are able to support the shelter. So critically important on that. The other thing I'd say is, it's not listed on here, but I would say the other part is important about the value or the strength of a public-private partnership, If you look at most of the successful accomplishments in any community, whether it's sports arenas or universities or hospitals, they all have that private-public element. And that's what a Friends of group brings to a public agency, right? The opportunity to do that. So we have that. So, all right, so those are some of the things to talk about with the Friends group. I'm going to talk briefly about the volunteer versus the professional side. I saw hands raised. I saw a lot of volunteer hands raised. There are pros and cons to both, right? So if you want to look at the pros to why to do a volunteer group, obviously no staff costs. That's a huge one. Institutional knowledge. Your volunteers are going to have a lot of institutional knowledge. Sometimes they'll have more institutional knowledge than even some of your employees, frankly, just because they've been there so long. And they're very, very passionate. All right. But if you want to look at some of the cons, they're not trained fundraisers, right? So you're limiting yourself in terms of that expertise. They may not focus on the shelter priorities. I've heard this from a lot of groups that I talk to that have volunteer ones, is they have great, passionate volunteers, but they're focused on their own things, not necessarily on the things that best support the shelter. And once again, interested in their own project and concerns. They always, my experience anyway, they want to lean towards events, special events, right, which are the lowest margin. We'll talk about this in a little bit. Lowest margin of return. And then as cons, I have to also put on there institutional knowledge and passion. Sometimes the institutional knowledge can work against you because all you think about is the way things always have been done. And you're not thinking about as much about what can be done. And the same thing with passionate. So passionate can be great, but sometimes passion can take you awry. So those are strengths, pros and cons. I'm going to show you on the professional pros and cons. I have to say that I'm admittedly biased, right? We are a professionally run Friends organization, so we're biased towards this, so I'm just going to acknowledge that bias up front. But if you look at it, the pros, trained fundraisers, responsible to leadership. I'm going to tie this into the next one down. Easier to make changes, right? If you need to change your executive director, you can change your executive director. And then you can realign your Friends group back on the mission they're supposed to. So easier to control. Consistent execution. I'd say this is really critically important too. Fundraising isn't a one-off activity. It's planned activity that has to happen continually and keep progressing and keep progressing. So you need to have that consistent execution that a pro staff can bring. Focused on people, also critically important. I'd say this, volunteers, and we have a lot of amazing volunteers at PAC. I love them. They're focused on animals, right? You need your people who are raising money to be focused on people. It's just a small nuance, but also a very important one. Last thing, the 10 fundraisers, there are a lot of things I'm going to talk about today they already know, and they're going to focus on higher margin activities. The cons, obviously the startup cost. There's salaries. There's a percentage of every donation that's not going to right to lifesaving, all those sort of things. And those are real, so those are the cost. But I say is I'm going to offer a variety of what I call cheat codes today, or hacks. Cheat code number one, I say if you are thinking about going professional route and you have some really supportive donors who might be considering larger gifts, an amazing way to make their investment last decades, right? Use a big gift to start your Friends club. A trained fundraiser should be able to generate 5 to 10 times their salary, right? So you're talking about within a year, that organization, your professionally run organization, would be self-sufficient. And you want to talk about creating a donor legacy. So something to think about if you're thinking about going that route. So, all right, let me pause there and see so far if there's any questions that anybody has to have. And I guess they're recording this, so if you do have questions, I either have to repeat it or you need to go to the microphone. And that's it. But I mean, I will have time for questions at the end, but I hate to save it all to the end and then everybody forgets, oh, I had a really good question, but I already forgot it. Anything anybody wants to talk about? Question? Yeah. Well, so he was asking what are the benefits to a private organization. Well, I guess I make a lot of times make an assumption that most private organizations already have a fundraising apparatus in place. So a Friends group, then I probably wouldn't start that outside of having your own fundraising apparatus. If you're a private organization and don't have a fundraising apparatus, obviously Animal welfare, I'm going to tell you this right now, is an incredible fundraising opportunity. I underappreciated it until I worked here, like how passionate and supportive people are. Now, the one thing in animal welfare, a little bit harder sometimes to get what we call the mega gifts. You're not going to necessarily use many $1 million, $5 million, $10 million gifts. But what you have a chance to get a lot of is $10,000 to $20,000, $50,000 gifts, and that range, and obviously smaller. So if you're not doing the fundraising, you're just missing a lot of those opportunities. And once again, I mean, you're talking about all that money going into lifesaving. These people are probably going to give somewhere, and as a collective group, we want them to be giving to save animals' lives, right? And we want to capture all those opportunities that we can. So, yeah. Another question.
Any tips on how to approach your volunteer friends of group and convince them they should go professional?
Well, that is definitely a trickier thing, but I think just results. I mean, yeah, what's that? Oh, sorry, I will repeat the question. She asked if there's any tips for how to talk to your volunteer run group about going professional. It's just about results, right? I mean, at the end of the day, even your volunteers care about saving animals' lives. And it's a very simple question, is like, I don't know what your group's raising right now, but say maybe if they're raising $100,000 a year for you, but if you're able to tell them, we take this professional, we can raise $500 to $1 million a year. And think about that, what that money can do to save animals' lives. And I mean, hopefully that's enough to get them on board. But I mean, if their heart's in the right place, it should. So, and I got maybe one more and I'll have to move on. Did you raise your hand before? Okay, I got one right here. She asked what the difference between low margin and high margin. Good lead into our next topic. So I can get one more question and then. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there is that disconnect because the strategy is really changing and becoming more formal. How can a professional fundraiser inspire volunteers, particularly board members and those who are making those leadership impacts,
Mm-hmm.
transition to be supportive of a truly highly structured fundraising annual plan?
Yeah. Well, I think the key is you have to keep them involved in the process, like make them feel like they have a role in it. So even with the professional staff, volunteer leadership is a really key component of it, right? It's got to be run by a board. It's got to have volunteers engaged with this. So you're doing the best you can to keep them as part of that process. And the reality is, I think that going back to it's about results. You keep them engaged in that process for the initial period, whether that's 12, 18, maybe 24 months. Like keep them engaged enough in it so they can actually get a chance to see the results, right? And then they can see some of the new programs you can put in place to help animals because of it. That would be probably my recommendation on that one. And I will have more, like I said, I can do more questions when we get towards the end. The other thing I'd say is I also put my business card up here. I'm here for 2.5 more days. I'm happy to have any conversation anybody wants to have about any of this offline. So, all right, I'm going to go to question number 2, which is where should our friends group invest their time, right? So, a couple things to always keep in mind. Whether it's volunteer run or whether it's staff run, your friends group is going to be small. Small staff, maybe just a handful of really dedicated volunteers. This is the reality. What we don't have in friends organizations is really complex fundraising apparatus like you would see at a university or Best Friends. Best Friends has an incredible fundraising apparatus. That's why they can do so many amazing things. But you're not going to have that at that. So you do have to be really efficient with what your group is doing. You got to keep them focused on those highest performing activities. You have to do what I call jumping some steps in development. Like development is actually 75% science, 25% art or creativity or whatever the case is. And that 75% is like just the progression of your donors along their, what they call the donor journey, right? Where they start as an annual. How do they get involved with you? They start as an annual, then they get bigger gifts, and they become major gift donors and all that. So you have to be able to jump some of those steps when you're working with a small staff. And towards that end, I will say this. Anybody want to guess what the number one source of donation revenue is? Plan giving is the part of it, yes. Anybody else? Small donations? That's definitely a big part of it. With those two things added together, it's this: individual donors. Like, this is the number one thing, if anybody takes away from here today, focus on individual donors, right? And this isn't even close. They make up 65 to 70% of all giving, right? And not only that, not only the biggest percentage, they're also the most consistent, reliable. Their giving is not as susceptible to the changes in the economy because they care about your program, right? They're more likely to make repeat gifts, sometimes within the same year. So this is a really key area. And so all your efforts, all of your friends group efforts need to be focused on this or how it supports individual giving. And let's go through this a little bit. I'll show you. So if you look, these are your main 6 areas of fundraising. I mean, there's more, but I'm just trying to simplify it, right? Special events, corporate relations, grants, annual fund, major gifts, planned gifts. So you can see half of these are individual donors, right? Thing is about supporting this list, you need to ask yourself, which of these is our friends group the most focused on? Because this list is in order, like the least effective is at the top to the most effective at the bottom. So if your group is in the special events, corporate relations, it's always going to have a hard time getting going. If it is focusing more on getting down to the annual fund major gifts, you got a much better chance. So, but what I'm going to talk about is how all these efforts you should have a little bit of all of this as part of a fundraising program, but how they all should support your individual, building towards individual gifts. Special events, perfect example. Everybody who's run special events, they're time intensive, results vary, you don't really know, but I'm going to encourage you as a little bit of a cheat. Your cheat code on this one is flip your mindset about special events, or get your friends group to flip their mindset about special events. Special events are about the start of the relationship, not the destination, right? Use special events. I mean, you want to make money off of them. You don't want to lose money. But a lot of people work and work and work and work, and we put on this great event, and the next day they're so relieved it's over, and we're done with that, and we're past it. That's actually should just be the way that you're introducing your new donors to your organization and building that relationship, right? So when you think about special events, or you're talking to your friends group about special events, make sure that's the mindset. How are we engaging new donors? And then how are we following up and communicating with them so they become better donors? Corporate relations. This is my personal pet peeve on it. They take so much time. I mean, and you go after them, and you got to, nowadays everything's so consolidated, you got to go 6 levels, 6 different people have to say yes, right? And any one of them say no, it's done. And then you get through that whole process, you find out, oh, yeah, we have a cap in our community. We can only give out up to $5,000, or we have to go get national. You can spend a lot of time on corporate relations, and you'll get some money, but you won't be getting as effective as you can be. One thing within that, a little bit of a cheat code, if you are going to work with corporate relations, try to work with groups that actually have employee giving programs. Best Friends, outstanding at that, right? So emulate that effort, so really important. But here's the hack I'll give you for these 2 right here. If you're going to do special events, you can combine the 2 together, right? Make special events that have a huge media presence, and it gives you all the marketing assets that make a sponsorship valuable to a corporate relation. We've emulated that in our place. We created something called the Pets of Pima Parade, and we got TV, it's televised, but we got TV, radio, print, so all of our sponsorships come into that, and they're a huge part of the revenue because there's enough value for the company to put money into it. But the true secret of all that is we're just using that corporate money, and as it's still young, as we grow the individual participation in it, with people actually paying to be, or raising money to be a part of the event. So right now we're just, same thing, as I say, it's all building towards how do we grow our individual donor component of it. All right, so there's that. And I'm going to, like I said, I would go through these fairly quickly because I think more of the meatier stuff we'll get at the end. I got to keep track here. All right, so grants. Hey, I love grants, but they're time intensive. Anybody want to argue with that? I should have a sign, prove me wrong. Grants take a lot of time, prove me wrong. They just do. And no offense to any grantors that might be in here, they do want a lot of information. And the challenge with them is they tend to be one-time funding, and you got to start a new program with it, and then you got to figure out how to make it sustainable. Wonderful ways to start a program. Once again, we try to flip our mindset is what grants can we get that help us launch a new program that we know that our donors will be interested in supporting moving forward as well. So it's another way to use opportunity to reach those individual donors. Annual fund, obviously, most important, small gifts. Someone said back there, it's interesting. Sometimes you're so happy you get a $5,000 gift, and then you think about, wow, I mean, how many $50 gifts do I have to get that equal this? But at the same time, a lot of those $5,000 start at 50 or lower, right? So the annual fund is your pipeline, incredibly important. Annual fund can also be very resistant to economic fluctuations, so a really important area to make sure that your friends group is focused on. And then giving days. I love the giving days now. Obviously, there's Giving Tuesday. In Arizona, we have Arizona Gives Day. I think most states now replicate that. One thing I will tell you, we have found to be incredibly successful is we focus on special projects for those days. Where I see a lot of groups just, make a donation to support us, and they do okay. I think we've pretty much tripled our success on those days just by making it all about projects. Because people love projects, they love to see tangible things, and it helps you stand out in a very crowded day of marketing and promotion. So one thing to keep in mind moving forward. I'm going to give you this one annual fund hack. There's a lot, but one big annual fund fact. So I think most people, if you're in fundraising, you know that the cost of getting the first donation is technically often more than the cost of what you're actually going to get, right? That's just donor acquisition. It costs more. The hard part then is on top of that, donor retention rates, you can average around 40%. So like you work so hard, get that first one, and you might lose 60% of them. I think something that we could do as a hack in animal welfare, because we get a lot of first-time gifts. I don't know if that's just where we are, but people love animals, and there's a lot of times we gifts that we didn't even necessarily know where it came from. We get them. Work on getting the second gift, right? Put extra emphasis